Greetings and konnichiwa, all members of the Cover Killer Nation, here and abroad. It's time for me to speak about an international 2011 release, which is going to be, well, wait a second, what am I talking about? It's been released. Yeah, it was released today, August the 2nd, 2011. Now, forgive me if I bastardize this, as I just bastardized the word bastardize. However, it's from the band Dir En Grey. It's their album DUM SPIRO SPERO. Probably wrong on that pronunciation, but you get what I'm saying. I'm not just going to say new 2011 album, because that would be gay. Not to mention, it's much funnier to make fun of me whenever I fail. Now, Dir En Grey is a band that has been on my radar for a while. However, it's a band that I have not followed too intently. And after listening to this album, and after also listening to Ouroboros from last year, I believe it was, I feel as though I may have, well, been shielding myself from something really unique. Kind of one of those interesting little cases where a band becomes undeniably unclassifiable simply because they're willing to explore multiple avenues of the same musical idea. And that musical idea is exploration, avant-garde, and creativity. And this is a band that definitely does all three of these things very well. They're willing to step outside of maybe their comfort zone to try something new. But what you should know is that for a very long time, these guys have been a long-running hard rock / metal outfit, a very experimentative one, that comes from Japan. If I were to describe this album, DUM SPIRO SPERO, in one way, in one metaphor, I would have to use popular Japanese animation, Dragon Ball Z. Because if I were to rate it, it would be over. No, I'm not going that route. The route that I am going to take, though, is that it seems that on this album, it's almost like they're collecting the Dragon Balls. Only the Dragon Balls instead are represented by different genres of the musical universe. One ball is avant-garde, another one is death metal, another one is euphoric symphonic rock, another one is grindcore, another one is just whatever the fuck you want to call it, another one is J-pop. I think that's 7. I don't know. I lost count. I'm not counting these things. You should be. But the idea still stands. This is an album that is extremely varied. There are even sludgy, doomy passages. Get my drift here that these guys really, really like to experiment. And that's what makes this album actually a really good experience. Because you're not quite sure of what's going to happen next. You're not quite sure what genre they're going to decide to maybe test out in the next song. You're not sure if the progression that you heard on track number 1 or 2 or 7 or whatever is actually going to manifest itself once again on the very next track, or if you're going to have to wait a couple tracks in order to hear it again. But if there's one thing that unifies this album together, it's the fact that it is almost like a unique flower or tree. The way in which its branches kind of divide off, well, you know that branches are going to occur on a tree. However, you're just not sure how they're going to twist and turn and be created. This band takes an attitude, in my opinion at least, that's very similar to this, where they have ideas for songs, they have musical gateways, but whenever they walk through the gates and they peer at the passageway or the place, the arena in which they have kind of stumbled upon after walking through this gateway, it's always someplace different. It's always something different. I really love the fact that this album is willing to take on multiple paces. It's willing to go from 3-minute tracks all the way up to 7 to 9-minute tracks. And the fact is that the lengthier tracks are still chock-packed full of experimental bliss. However, it's not necessarily on these tracks where that is the most apparent. No, in fact, that is shared between the shorter tracks and the longer tracks. In fact, some of the shorter tracks actually boast more of the experimentative nature because they're faster, they're more aggressive, they need something to cool it down a little bit before launching back into the main musical idea once again. In fact, the longer musical tracks show a little bit more in the way of innovation, whereas the first track, which is track number 2, I'm not going to remember song titles because half of them are in Japanese. However, in track number 2, you see and feel more of a progressive and a sludgy environment, more of a doomy environment, something where you're thinking, is this really Dir En Grey? And you realize, yes, it is, because the vocals kick in, there's some euphoria there, and it's a very unique and one-of-a-kind affair. Then you hit the 9-minute and 37-second long track, and there's a lot of different avenues that this one takes. This one has a nice sound musical idea. It's something that has pacing that adequately suits its length, where it's not something that's going to be crawling at all periods of time. However, it is not a type of song that's going to try to rush itself. And then it launches into other ideas and branches off, almost becoming its own individual tree. Each and every song is like an individual tree, where the branches and the way in which it's put together is completely different than the other one. Kind of like Snowflakes. Lewis Black made that one really popular, and you guys say I'm a lot like Lewis Black. Well, I'm going to use the fucking metaphor. Ladies and gentlemen, if I were to rate this album, I would have to rate it over 8. In fact, I would probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. This is actually a really solid affair. I think the only thing that bogs it down a little bit is its length. Now, while I do enjoy something that's this explorative and innovative and unique, it's something where it did overstay its welcome after a while. It's one thing to do something really well and do it consistently, but whenever you do it overly consistently and to the point where you're just kind of like, okay, you can give it a rest, well, that sometimes can dock off points. If this was an album that was right around, say, I don't know, 50 minutes in length, damn, this would be really hard to beat. This would actually be pretty untouchable. But the fact that it sort of overstayed its welcome a little bit does knock off some points. Not to mention, it does get tiring after a while. So aside from that, though, these guys, well, I gotta say, this is a band that I'll certainly be reviewing in the future, and one that I hope that you guys will check out. Also, I want to take the opportunity to thank you guys who are abroad, perhaps some of you viewing this from Japan, who are either subscribers of mine or who are going to become subscribers because of this video. Gracias, gracias, gracias. I know that's not Japanese whatsoever, but the point is across. Thank you very much for supporting the Cover Killer Nation. And if you're not supporting yet, you should be. Hit that subscribe button and become part of the fastest growing heavy metal, rock and roll, music, reviewing community this world's ever going to see. So all I gotta say to Japan is, fuck Godzilla, the new giant, the new monolith that you have to fear. The name in which should resonate from each and every tongue as the giant that it truly is. Should be Dir En Grey.